today I'm going to be going over finishing your beat, finalizing it. How do I piece this thing together? A lot of the times we start off with one sequence, and within that one sequence we have our entire beat. But what happens next? How do we do an intro, a bridge, a verse? You got song mode, and then you also have mutes. The mutes within the MPC, you could just mute certain programs, and you could pretty much finish your song with one sequence and just mute and unmute different elements of that beat. Now this video is going to be for anybody that's going through the same thing that I've been through, which is you make one long sequence and you're just stuck within that sequence and you don't know what to do next, how to finish it. I'm going to help you out right here, or at least share some ideas on how I go about this and finalize your beat. So let's jump right into it. All right, so right here I have a beat that I was working on last night, and this actually came out really good. One thing that I've mentioned before is when I'm working on beats, in the moment, when I'm putting everything together, when I'm in production mode, I could be a little sloppy, a little messy. As you guys can see right here, this is called track 6, and this program is just called third. Like, I have no idea what that is. I'm just moving very fast. I'm not too much of a perfectionist when I'm in my creative state of mind. So now that I'm ready to print this out, is I'm gonna be using some of these mute groups right here and also some of these sequences. I wanna make sure I'm a bit organized. So I'm gonna go through on how I start piecing different puzzles together. So what do I mean by a puzzle, right? I have sequence 2 right here, I have sequence 1, and then I have sequence 3. First, let me show you guys what I have, this beat that I'm working on, and let's listen to a little bit of this. All right, so right there's the idea and kind of like the main body of the beat. What I do right now that I'm about to print this out, I like to organize my sequences, what is what, and how am I gonna play around with this, do some drops, some cutoffs. Now there's 2 ways that you can play and fluctuate your beat so it's not so repetitive. One way is using song mode. What song mode is, if you go to your menu, you go into the song icon, and right here, you can start building your song using different sequences. I don't really have a structure right now, but this is one way you could build your song. Or a different way you could make your drops, intros, and cutoffs is by going into this mute section. If you hit this mute option right here, you will see all your different programs within that sequence. So if you hit play, right now, we're listening to this SP drums, your bass. It's a little unorganized, but what this is gonna do, whenever you hit a pad, it's gonna unmute that pad, and now you'll be able to listen to what that is. Now, this is my favorite way of utilizing this because I'm just kind of going based off of what I feel. But before I do this method, I wanna make sure I'm naming my programs because I don't know what I'm muting. I have to make sure I'm organized. Track 1 is my drum break. I'm gonna name this program DRM-BRK. That just helps me know what that is. Let me see what this is. This is gonna be my flute sample. So I'm actually gonna name this FLT sample. Whatever helps you remember what that is. And then track number 3 is gonna be my Vox sample. Like, this sample has vocals in it. So on this one, I'm gonna name it Vox. Track 4 is my bass, and track 5 is my one-shots. These one-shots are actually, these are part of my new sample pack, link down in the description if you guys like how these drums sound. One-shot DRMs. Now when I jump into my mute groups, I'm able to see everything. All these pads represent a track or a program within this sequence. So if I wanna, let's just say I wanna start off with no drums, so I mute these drums, and I just wanna start off with the strings and bass. Now I can just hit play. And now if I wanna start off with the strings in the first sequence, I have everything else muted, and I'm gonna bring in the drums as it drops. There you go. And then if I want to bring in the vocal sample chops, I'm going to bring it in right after this loops. Now Now, if I want to do some cut-offs, I can cut off the drums. Okay, so hopefully you understood a little bit about these mutes, how this works. What a lot of people do, and this is actually what I do sometimes, I build a whole entire beat within this one sequence. So in this sequence, if I go to my grid editor, I'm gonna zoom out. My track number 1 is my drums. This is just a drum break that's looping. So that's a drum break. And track number 2, I started just chopping up my sample because I build this beat based off of that drum break. And then track number 3, I have that same sample, but a different section from that record, which was just a girl's vocals, which is right here. So I'm kind of putting that on top. And then on track 4, I have a bass line. And then on track 5, now I wanted to add my one-shots, my drum one-shots. So right here, if I solo this is my drums, it's just one-shots. The reason why I'm adding one-shots on top of my drum breaks is because the drum breaks feel good to me. I love the texture that drum breaks will bring to my beat, but I do not feel like all drum breaks punch the way I want them to. So I'll layer that drum break with some punchy one-shots that have body, that have punch to it. And when I kind of get a good blend with my drum break and my one-shots, it just punches a lot better. So if I solo, let me solo just the drum break. Like that feels hard, man. Like that feels really good, but it doesn't have a lot of punch to it. But if I bring in my one-shots that I added on top of that drum break, now it's punching. I like that. The only thing that you have to be careful when you're layering a drum break with one-shots is that it's a little hard to do it with the MPC because you're not looking at waveforms, you're looking at MIDI notes. You just gotta make sure your kicks and your snares are in phase. The way I go about that, I'm not gonna get too technical right there because that's a whole different video, is I'll listen to the drum break, and when I'm adding my one-shots, I get off of quantize and I just add my one-shots on top of my drum breaks as I'm playing along to that drum break. Hopefully that makes sense, and if you guys wanna know more about that, let me know. I'll probably make a video on how I get those kicks in phase so they punch. If it's out of phase, it's gonna flop, so it won't be as pleasing. So as you can see, I have up to 6 different tracks, different drums, different sample chops, and they're all stacked up on top of each other, but they're not all playing at the same time. I'm utilizing these mutes to cut off some tracks and organizing my track according to the way I feel. Now this is new to me because when I used to work in a DAW, you have everything in the arrangement window and you could piece everything together by dragging over clips, and that's really cool. But when we're dealing with just standalone in an MPC, we're no longer dragging over clips, we're just listening to tracks and freestyling what we want to open up and what we want to close up. I hit record in my recorder, in my case is Ableton. Once you hit record, you perform your beat and you're muting and unmuting based off the way you feel. So as you can see, I'm performing my beat, but when I perform my beat, and I'm already at this stage of performing my beat, you want to make sure you're naming your sequences, you're naming your tracks, because when you're dealing with muting different tracks, you need to see what's what, and they could get very confusing if you got 6, 7, 8 tracks and they just called tracks. You don't know what you're muting, so making sure you're very organized. Now jumping over to my signal chain as I'm gonna print out my beat, as you guys can see how I'm setting up and organizing and preparing my beat to be performed before I record it. I am coming out of the MPC into the SP404 Mark II, and then in the SP404 Mark II, I'm just using 303 vinyl simulator and the cassette tape just to add some texture to the overall beat. Coming out of the SP404 into this electro-harmonics compressor. This electro-harmonics compressor, it's not doing much in this beat. This beat is pretty open. It's not a tight beat. It's not punching. It's pretty open. There's a lot of air within this beat. So I'm not drastically compressing it for a certain tone or flavor. I'm compressing this mainly to control the transients of this beat. I usually love to smash this with the compressor, and I love the tone, the compression that it gives, the pumping effect that this platform compressor gives. But in this case, I'm not going for that sound. I'm just controlling those transients. So when I print this, now speaking about the DAW, and actually right now that we're heading over to the DAW, and what do I do right here in my Ableton session, is once I print out my beat, everything sounds good. I have my beat laid out in Ableton. In Ableton, there's actually this plugin. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of it, but it's the Ozone 9 plugin. Ozone 9, if you're not a mastering engineer and you're like, yo, I don't know how to master a track, Ozone 9 has this feature where it will master the track using AI, and it does a pretty good job. If you're someone that doesn't know anything about mastering, I would recommend checking out Ozone 9 because, again, it's gonna sound better than you trying to master your track not knowing what you're doing. So I would definitely look into that. There's a lot of my beats that I use that AI mastering, and once it does it for me, I'll go in there and tweak a little bit of what it did for me and tying it up a bit. But for the most part, it sounds very good. So that's pretty much how I've been finalizing my beats. I look at a SP404 kind of like a texture box. I also have Modbap, a performer. It also has some really cool sounds and textures to that box. I would look into, if you guys want to really just finish off your beats within the MPC, I would invest in anything. I mean, there's so many different boxes that will add texture to your overall sound. I like that. I have fun exploring different hardware units that will add texture to my music because, again, I'm just doing everything right here. I've mentioned this and I've said this before. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not mixing with crazy technicality. I'm just having fun with my music and I'm rolling with my instinct. I'm rolling with what feels right to me. This is just performing your beat. And when it comes down to performing something, I go based off of the way I feel. And that's how I print this finalized idea. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys want to look a little more into sequences and how to put sequences together, make sure you check out the video right here and I'll hang out with you guys right there. Thank you, and y'all have a blessed day.